Welcome to Fire Footwear, everybody. It's a little bit different this time, so we're taking a few artistic liberties and we're trying to do something a little bit different. This is the first ever Fire Footwear live on YouTube. It's also going to go out in the audio space as well, so for those of you listening in the audio space, I appreciate you as well. I did not come out with anything last week, and you've probably noticed if you're watching on YouTube, and for those of you listening at home, I do not have the usual background that I normally have when I'm on YouTube. What I have is my father-in-law's office, which is adorned with a bunch of cool things, if I'm being honest, because he is a retired colonel in the Air Force, and there's a lot of cool patriotic things here. 4th of July is in a couple of days for those of you in the US, so it has actually been, or at least it's a good little backdrop here. But I wanted to do something a little bit different than I normally do. And of course, I want to thank everybody for tuning in, whether you're on YouTube or whether you are in the audio space. And I want to thank you because I always say this, but it's not a given that people are going to watch or listen to your content. And so for me, it makes me feel really good whenever people come to the yard and you guys really bring it strong. And I hate when I have to miss a week. And so I wanted to do something a little bit different for those of you who are at home and for those people who maybe want to ingest the show a little bit differently. And the reason I wanted to do so is because the episode I was going to do last week, which I'm also going to release this week, was about the state of sneakers in 2024, meaning we're looking at the state of sneakers because we're halfway through the year. But some announcements have come out over the last week or so that I think warrant a little bit of a different feel from me, and I think warrant a more organic, a more raw opinion from me, because I think that they hit a nerve or hit many nerves within the sneaker community. So we obviously are in a place in sneakers now where it seems like nothing is really off the table, but we do know that these companies, and I'm talking specifically about Nike here, that they have at least some kind of a boundary that they're not willing to cross, because just about any Jordan is retroable, just about any Yeezy seems like it's inbounds, where Adidas is releasing them now. We're talking about releasing them at even 50% off. But in sneakers, there is sort of this line that companies won't cross. And I'm looking really at like Nike, Jordan Brand, and I think more specifically Nike SB, because I think there are a handful of Jordans that have come out that probably warrant unicorn status. And Nike has decided recently that they're going to start releasing some of these. And I think a lot of people have opinions about that. So the biggest one, I think, was the announcement, I think it was last week, maybe even 10 days ago, that the Undefeated Jordan 4s were going to finally get a re-release, which is how it was presented via Complex. And I disagreed with that a little bit because I believe that the Undefeated 4s never really got a proper release. They've made 72 of them. There are tons of samples, but never anything that hit shelves to where real sneakerheads could actually get them. I'm sure that Undefeated gave a bunch of friends and family packs out. I'm sure that if you had a relationship with them, that you could probably have gotten a pair. But if you're just an average Joe or Jane like myself, there's no way that you had a chance to get a pair. And if you have the kind of money to buy them, I think that you have, a little bit more flexibility in your finances than somebody like me. And I felt a certain way about this because it seemed like a misstep by Nike to do so. And let me be clear about that, is I don't think it's a misstep because people have the opportunity to get this shoe. I think it's a misstep because of how long or how much time has passed. And I do believe that when things had a moment or when things had a heyday, that there is a line or a period of time that you can't really cross before it becomes almost a parody of itself. We're in that phase now where nostalgia is being trafficked in so heavily because people in my age bracket want to see things that remind them of times of yesteryear. And I think a lot of times when this nostalgia is trafficked in, it isn't done very well. I think there are some examples, and we're getting better at it. And there are some examples. I think Cobra Kai as a show is a great example of this because I think that something that is so old, Karate Kid is 40 years old this year, but to do something with it and to do so in a way that pays homage to the past and brings it forward, I think is a really great thing. But not always is that the case. And with the with the Undefeated Jordan 4s, these never got a release. And so they have become mythical in their story, in their lore. And they're a part of sneaker culture in a way that very few shoes get to be. And I think that Nike going into the vault and giving them a proper release, I don't know if that's the right thing to do. Obviously, it's a shoe that I would love to have. In full disclosure, I do have a replica pair of them, but I don't wear them very often because I do know how sacred they are. I got them because I wanted to see what they would look like in hand, and the pair that I have is really nice, so I can only imagine what the real pairs were like. But I understand the significance of the shoe. I understand the significance of what it means to the culture for this shoe to be at the status that it actually is. And so for Nike to go into the vault and pass over all these different shoes and go all the way back to the undefeated Jordan 4s, to me feels like a misstep, because I think that it's something that the time has passed. It's enough time has passed that it should stay where it is. And a couple days ago, Nike teased, it seemed, a release or some type of a return or resurgence of the Wu Tang Dunk highs. And this is another shoe that was even more limited than the undefeated Jordan 4s. From what I understand, I think it was in the 30s in terms of pairs that they made. A good number of those went to the group. A good number of those went to friends and family of the group. And there was never even any type of mass release of these. Now, there have been Dunk highs that came out that were yellow, that were black, the Bumblebee colorway, the Steelers colorway, whatever it is that you associate. And a lot of people have those. Now, they go for just over or just under retail, but these Wu-Tang ones mean something to a certain sect of people. I didn't grow up listening to a lot of hip hop, but I know who Wu-Tang is, and I certainly have an appreciation for them. But the unicorn status of that shoe to me was not something that I felt like, oh, I have to have that. The search for something like that would never have been included in the way that I participate in sneaker cultures, and it would never have come across my bow even in replica form, because I just don't have that kind of an emotional association with them, and I don't see them as something worth that kind of emotional, financial, and time investment. But I, again, think that Nike is trying to kindle some or rekindle some fire that they feel like they have lost. And this sort of ties into the state of sneaker culture, but you could make the argument that sneakers are on a downturn and that Nike themselves are on a major downturn. Now, there's always ebbs and flows economically with these businesses and with these commodities. And so you're going to get ups and downs. But I think this represents a very, very low lull for Nike specifically, because we have seen a lot of retro sit. We've seen a lot of colorways sit. And what does that mean? Well, it means a couple of things in my mind. First thing, it means that the shoes that they're coming out with too many of them. And it also means that they're not doing anything that really wows the culture as a whole. Don't get me wrong, there is a lot of heat to be had. And I always say this about sneakers, and I think that's very true, that there is something for everybody. So what is my taste doesn't have to be your taste and somebody else's taste. And I think that that makes it a great thing. So you can be wearing New Balances, I can be wearing Jordans, and somebody could be wearing a hybrid or a mix of all of them. And that fits your aesthetic, it fits your style. And I think that that is actually a good thing. However, I think that the culture has sort of been made up of a bunch of people who have been in it for different reasons and I think originated it. And it doesn't mean that it's better than in the old days. And I'm talking about, I think that the newer version of sneaker culture, the newer version of sneakerheads, of hype beasts and so forth, I think that they live the culture a little bit differently. I think that there are different elements and different aspects of sneaker culture that resonate with them that don't resonate with the older culture, myself included. And so I think resale has changed a lot of things. Obviously, financially, it's changed people being able to afford shoes. And I think also it has changed a lot of people's mindsets about shoes. And I know that with the Undefeated 4s and the Wu Tang Dunks, there's a large section of people who don't see it as an opportunity to have something that they thought was unobtainable. They see it as a way to make a profit, and nothing wrong with that. This is capitalism, and you do whatever it is that you do in terms of sneakers. But you're now taking two shoes and something that is in an unattainable class, and you're making it available to the masses. We think, we don't know for sure. And Nike has they've certainly pivoted in terms of announcements, in terms of things that we thought would happen. For all we know, it's going to be an extremely limited run of these, and maybe it should be. So we don't really have a lot of answers, but it does beg the question in a larger sense about whether Nike is doing the right thing. and also whether anything is now inbounds to be retroed or released. And I think the real question is, should these shoes be released in the first place? Where is the line drawn? If you're talking about the unicorn of unicorns in terms of shoes, then that means that a lot of shoes that have had even larger releases are theoretically inbounds. We don't see a lot of retroed Nike SB Dunks, and that's just a fact. We don't see re-releases of the Pigeons. We don't see re-releases of the Tiffany Dunks or the Diamond Supply, excuse me. And I think that's because Nike SB, as a part of Nike, has decided that they want to keep those shoes sacred, that it matters more that they had their time and that they are a part of history. And I think Nike SB sees a lot of these shoes almost as a museum to what once was for Nike SB. And I think that there is some merit to that. I think there's merit to people being able to get shoes that maybe they've always wanted, but haven't had the ability to get. And I know that money isn't something that is a barrier for everybody, but it does represent a barrier for a lot of people. And so money is not always something that can fix everybody's issue. Yes, Diamond Supply Company Dunks are available, but they're also very old. So if you want to wear them, will you be able to wear them? Even if you can afford them. And you see where I'm going with this. I worry that Nike is panicking, that they are looking at their revenue stream, that they are looking at their revenues that are going down in terms of their sneaker sales, and they are making decisions now that they're trying to almost capture lightning in a bottle for a very, very short moment. And that worries me because that doesn't do sneaker culture anything in the long run. I mean, obviously it does it in the short term, because people might be hyped for this release, but you got to remember, and I think sometimes the executives, the people making decisions at Nike forget that now in society, this is not just a sneakers conversation. People rinse and repeat things so quickly. We see moments on Instagram, we see them on Twitter, X, and we digest them, and that's it. We're done. So with sneakers, we ingest them in terms of the release. We're excited. We get them in hand. And by the time we actually get them, we've moved on. And so going into the archives, so deep into the archives and pulling out shoes that never really had a moment in the sun ever, I don't think that's a good thing. I think it is okay for there to be shoes that remain in this mythical status. I mean, imagine if they went and tried to re-release Red Octobers without Kanye at Nike. I think it would represent a misstep there also, because the mythical nature of how those shoes released and what they mean to people who actually got them would sort of be taken away by flooding the market. And I'm just not a fan of it. And so I wanted to come on here and go live and also present this to the audio audience as well, because it's something that's been buzzing everywhere. And I know for a fact that there is a section of people who feel really excited about this because they have an opportunity to get something. And there is a section of people who want it to stay where it is. And the thing is, though, is that in the end, we're talking about shoes. We're talking about sneakers. We're not talking about something that is life altering. Certainly the emotional connection that we have to sneakers can be life changing. And I know that I have people in the Instagram group that I made that they have these moments that are emotionally tied to these sneakers. And I think that's a great thing, because I think sometimes we need something to get us through life, through the really, really tough parts of life. And maybe these sneakers, the Wu Tang Dunks, maybe they represent that to somebody else. Maybe the Undefeated Jordan 4s represent that to somebody else. I'm not sure. I just know that philosophically, I don't agree with them going into the archives that deep, because I worry that now everything is on the table and that the history of sneakers is going to be somewhat sullied, I guess, or murky, or some of these shoes just won't have the same mythical status that they did have. And for people that have been in the culture for a long time, it takes away the ability to sort of talk about them and fantasize about them in some way. There's going to be sneakers for everybody. The new generation is going to have their version of those as we move along with this, because as people like me get older, some of us are probably going to age out of the culture. Not necessarily all of us, but some of us may. And the younger people are going to come up behind us. And as we get further away from these moments in time, further away from the Wu Tang Clan being relevant in a meaningful way, further away from the Jordan 4 Undefeated being meaningful in sneaker culture. There's going to be other moments that are going to come up, and the younger generation is not going to care as much about some of the things that came before us. It's just a changing of the guard, and Nike is making a very they're making almost a hasty move to try to capture something that they feel like they're missing, when in the end Nike is going to be fine as a business. Nike is going to be fine in the sneaker department because they flood the market with so many of them that they're going to sell. And even the ones that don't sell will eventually sell when they hit the outlet. So I'd love to know what you think. If you're listening in audio, you can, of course, get in touch with me on Instagram. At Fire Footwear Pod is the handle on Instagram. I do have a group chat that a good number of people have now become a part of. It's a place where we talk sneakers, we talk life. It's really fun. So if you hit me up on Instagram, of course, I'd love for you to send me a DM, and I'd love to get you as a part of that group. If you're watching on YouTube, and of course, you can get this in the audio show notes, the voicemail to call this show now is up. And if you are in the US, it is area code 202-643-9170. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the show. I'd love to hear your thoughts on sneaker culture. I'd also love to hear sneaker stories, and I'd love to be able to highlight them and play them on a future episode so that I can hear these stories of people that have been out in the culture longer than I have, that experience it differently than I do. And that's a lot of fun to me. So I would love to hear from people who are big sneaker enthusiasts, sneaker fans, and I'd love to highlight you on the show. Of course, you can email firefootwearpod@gmail.com if you want to get in touch with me that way. And I just appreciate that anybody listens. And if you're an audio listener, Apple, Spotify, any podcast app, specifically if you're on Apple Podcasts, it means a lot if you rate and review the show. I just got a really, really great review from somebody who listens to the show. It's nice to know that there are people out there who have been listening silently for a while and that I have given you something to make you happy about. So for everybody who tuned into this live, I hope this finds you well. As I always say, I hope this finds you safe, and hopefully we can do this again another time. But for everybody else, I will talk to you next time. This is Fire Footwear. The opinions and viewpoints expressed on Fire Footwear are those of Matt Frates and his guests, and not necessarily those of the Matty Ice Media Network. Fire Footwear is exclusively owned by Matt Frates and is brought to you by the Matty Ice Media Network.